Jerika. I use she, her.
And I'm Haley, and I use she, her.
And this is Insight Check, where we delve into the dungeon of your bad decisions to retrieve the treasure of wisdom. Welcome, one and all.
Wisdom. Welcome.
We're going to do something a little bit different. You may have noticed that it's just the two of us. We can make it if we try. Just the two of us. Just the two of us. Okay, that's enough of that. I like you platonically, Haley.
I as well.
Anyway, I have been really into this concept of environmental storytelling. And this is a concept from video game creation. And I first heard about it from Day 9 or Sean Plott. I used to watch his Let's Plays religiously, and he was also a big fan of environmental storytelling. We are going to do what I'm going to call a world workshop, where we're going to workshop some ideas I have for a new world, so y'all can maybe see how it's done. I don't know if I want to go that far.
And I will ask Jerika some questions.
Yes.
That hopefully will help her.
Yes. So we're going to do a little mini workshop here. We're going to use the concept of environmental storytelling and also Pixar's 22 rules of storytelling, which I think sounds cool. And Haley, I think, has some other resources. So If you get nothing else out of this episode of us just workshopping it, maybe you'll get some resource ideas that can help you. Okay?
Yes,
okay.
and
we're all agreed. Great.
And a lot of my resources are, I've done NaNoWriMo a few times, which is coming up.
What does that stand for, Haley?
NaNoWriMo is National Novel Writing Month, and it happens in November.
And, like Jeriford K. Horcrums, I also think of my D&D campaigns as my, my oeuvre, my life's work, my reason for existing. No, that's going a little far. But, I look at Jay's work. I've participated in a couple games in his Shambhala setting, and he seems to have a really clear idea about what's going on there. And he's been developing, I think, he's been developing Shambhala for several years. And I don't know, you got to start somewhere, right?
Yep.
It might not be all fleshed out by the time I run whatever first game I'm running, but something's better than nothing, right, Haley?
Yep, you've got to start somewhere, and I think that's the exciting thing that you can remind yourself going into this, is that in D&D, it is an interactive storytelling game, and so it is natural for your world to continue to evolve and develop once you put characters in it. So it doesn't need to be perfect, but it is good to have thought about some things before you start so that you can immerse your players in the experience of the game. Spooky, because it's also almost Halloween. Sure, that's why.
Great, cool. We're still a month out. It's fine.
That's fine.
So the first thing I'm doing that you cannot see, because this is not a visual medium, is I am opening a Google Doc.
Can you start for our audience and give the definition of environmental storytelling, and then proceed with the Google docking?
So environmental storytelling is using the environment to tell a story in a passive sort of way. So you have NPCs that characters can interact with. But you also have locations where people go to, and you can learn about what has happened at that location, or things that were important to the people who lived there, or events that happened that kind of affected that physical space, or even remnants that were left over from something or someone. And these can all be used to the benefit of the DM to tell a story perhaps in a different way than you can convey it through a an NPC.
Yeah, and it doesn't always have to be like, and in this land there was a war 100 years ago. But they could maybe come across old battlefields with remnants of fighting, and then they might talk to a helpful local person who talks about the Great War. So
it's very much show me instead of tell me, right? I think that's some sort of caveat from like film or whatever.
Yes.
Like if it's a visual medium, you don't just like use words, you use images and you use expressions and all that kind of stuff, all the stuff that's compelling on film. So I feel like if you have skills like perception and investigation, things like that, you can use those to tell more about the story than you might otherwise be able to.
So now that you have your Google document.
So I have my Google Doc, my newly minted Google Doc. I have named this world. It might change. Obviously, this name might change. But the name of the world is Yragi, Yragi. And I got this name from Fantasy Names Generator.
My favorite resource. Throwback to early episode.
Excuse me, fantasynamesgenerators.com with an
.com.
S. And what I did, okay, so first I went to world names. I did not like any of them. They were all very like English words. Let's put two of them together, like Hollow Haven and Sphere of Black and Shadowlands. And I'm like, that's not what, like, Earth doesn't actually mean anything. Like, it isn't two English words together. It's Earth. And that's what it is. Like, that's the word for it. If that makes sense. Like, we don't call Earth, like, my wondrous abode.
My wondrous.
So instead, I hopped over to god names because I remembered that Gaia was the original, the ancient word for the earth, goddess, and also the earth. And I thought maybe I could go that route, maybe throw it back to ancient times. And Yragi was a great god name that was on there. And I was like, that doesn't mean, it evokes what it is. It's Yragi. Yes. It's that orb in the sky that we live upon in this game. There's some thoughts.
Nice. Do you have some general starting point ideas of like what type of setting is this? Are you going for more of a fantasy type setting?
It sure is. I have a lot of fun in Forgotten Realms, so I kind of want that flavor, that Sword Coast flavor, that kind of stuff, that Moonsea flavor. I have written here some things. So I was thinking about the nature of stories, and after I sort of put this list together that I'm going to share with you post haste, I thought this is the Sailor Moon story. And I'm wondering if it was the first one I gravitated towards because it's the way that a lot of stories I've heard and experienced work. This is sort of the progression. Your protagonists find something. Like, let's say they find a compact that a cat gives them, a magical one.
Uh-huh.
They say, okay, cool, here's a compact. I guess I should find out more information about it. And so then it's like search or look for more information about this, about the extent of the knowledge that you have, which is a very small amount. Mm-hmm. You meet someone who knows a little bit more about it. So Sailor Moon meets Sailor Venus, for example, and Sailor V knows all about everything. And then you might seek out experts about this, whatever it is, this event or topic or sea change in the world that happened. You might witness a new event, something happening in real time. Okay, now this story is pertinent to my life because it's happening now.
Mm-hmm.
you endeavor to learn more because it's more immediate. It's like, oh, okay, that star just exploded. Let me learn more about exploding stars for real now. And then you might, I would say the next step is to become that which is needed. Perhaps a hero, a princess from the moon.
From the moon.
And then after that, you grow in power and confidence. You find your friends. You get confident about what you all can do together by fighting monsters of the week. You confront the terror, and then you win or lose. And that's sort of like a general progression that I feel somewhat comfortable with as far as like sort of how the players will experience the setting. But you got to have that, like,
yeah, we got to have that good
basis,
setting,
right? The way it's working out, I have an idea that there might be 3 players in this game. I'm not sure if that's going to be the way it works out. This could be rearranged, but I was thinking about religious triads. Like, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost is a real, relatable one. There's also other ones in religion, Maiden, Mother, Crone, the Fates, the Furies, all those ones from Greek mythology. You know what I mean, that kind of stuff. So I was perusing the Wikipedia page about triads in religion, and I came across the Dharmic one of the Creator, the Preserver, and the Destroyer. And I really like that idea. And I also considered, okay, so if that's your sort of status quo, what would be anti-status quo? What's the terror? And so Destroyer in many cases is your terror, but that's all wrapped up in the good stuff. And if you think about it, like everything has a season, turn, and a time amongst the sun, turn, whatever that song is.
Turn. Yeah.
Somebody out there knows.
I know what you're talking about.
Yes,
someone out there
sure.
sing it for us.
And I think that's based on a Bible verse. But I don't know. Whatever's fine. Someone's screaming like, I know what it is. Anyway, so things have their time. They live to the fullest extent of what they're meant to be, and then they don't anymore. It's the story of life and existence. It's what it is. But imagine if the cycle of creation, preservation, destruction was completely randomized. And it went back and forth, and it went from here to here, and it jumped around. So example is something is destroyed. Let's say a Sararak is destroyed, and then he's created immediately afterwards, which means he's back. Like, we worked so hard, and now he's fucking back again. Or Lyra's Silverhand is destroyed, and then her destruction is preserved, which means we can never get her back. You're preserving her in her destroyed form, if that makes sense. That kind of thing. Like, if you mess up this wheel that turns only clockwise, what happens? Well, chaos happens. So I kind of identified chaos as
the opposite of
the opposition, if you will.
And so are you thinking of this in terms of like guiding principles of the world? Or are you thinking of this in terms of religion?
So that's one concept. And this concept is cross-world. So it crosses all of the racial groups in the world, which is all your D&D races, whatever. And in each generation... we get very Avatar right now. There is a triad of chosen ones who represent creation, preservation, and destruction. And as the races come to consciousness of a certain level, they have participants in this generational lineage. Okay, I know that's a lot of words. So like, this is generalization. I think this is kind of the way it is in Forgotten Realms, but I'm not positive. So like, way back in the day, you had the giants and the dragons, and let's say the first creator, preserver, destroyer was like a triad of dragons, and then maybe the next generation it was giants, and then I think something happened. There was a big war. And then I think that was the rise of the elves. Please don't tweet at me. I'm not going to see it. I'm just guessing from what I've heard. And so then the next generation was elves. And then I think the dwarves were the same time. So then it was dwarves. And then maybe Dragonborn in there. But then like the race of man came after that. So you had a generation of creator, preserver, destroyer, the next generation. So you're building those layers. And
so it's there's only one group from one race at a time.
Not necessarily. I think you could have like, it was elves for a while. They also live longer, so maybe not. But like, it could be successive generations until the next sort of group rises to whatever the cutoff is for becoming part of this. I thought a little bit about this, and I thought like the world now kind of is presented in the Forgotten Realms. It's kind of the time of the gnome. I know that doesn't necessarily make any sense, but we just got new artificers, and gnomes are really good at like building things and being artificers, I think. And so, you know, that's kind of the new wave. And additionally, Vi, Jeremy Crawford's fan favorite NPC, is very, very popular. I would love for Vi to be like one of the current creators or preservers. Bring that in. But yes. So I think that there exists in this world remnants of the previous triads. So there might be tombs or grottos or grave sites or whatever that are of like the third destroyer or whatever. But this isn't necessarily a religion. This is more of, I see modern Christianity as very different from ancient Norse mythology, right? So like ancient Norse mythology. Ancient Norse mythology was like a way of humans trying to understand things that were outside their control. Storms and earthquakes and flooding and things like that kind of thing.
Yeah, I would say that like modern religion is still an extension of that. It's just we have different things that we don't understand. Does that make sense? So people are trying to explain life and death and all of that stuff, but we know what the weather is now.
Yes.
It's not based in that. Yeah.
Yes. So, and I think there's a long tradition of storytelling in modern religion. That lends less of an immediate sort of threat to one's existence. I don't know. These are many thoughts. This is going to be the thoughts aplenty podcast.
So here's some general questions, because I think you have a general concept of some of the stuff that you want people to experience. Like, so you have an idea of what you want people to experience, like in terms of your players and the path. Right?
That sort of stumbling upon something and then seeking and then finding someone and then learning more about it and then becoming the avatar, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, becoming the next triad of. So I think like that, like you've got like a good concept of sort of where you want things to go and that conclusion state, or like the action in conclusion,
right? So like
at least the general trajectory and the climax, and that actually fits. Going back to Pixar's 22 rules of storytelling,
yes,
Pixar recommends to come up with your ending before you figure out the middle. And if you figure out your ending, then you have a logical place. Like it says, endings are hard. Get yours working up front. But I think if you have an idea of where you want things to go to,
like I want 3 awesome, fully realized superheroes to try and beat chaos. That's what I want.
And preserve the world. Great. I feel like you've got your overarching goal for this whole endeavor, story, campaign, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So I think it's building up the foundation underneath that.
Yeah.
So I feel like this is a good time to jump into some questions that I'm going to pull from. This is a very lengthy document, but I think it's got some good things in here. I found it on a NaNoWriMo resource site, but it is the World Building Questionnaire by thewritingcafe.tumblr.com. So I'm going to just go through and pick a few questions out because I think that some of them, and there's actually, okay, I guess I'm jumping around, but there are 2 sites with really good, like, detailed sets of questions that I think even just skimming through them could be very good. Like, I used to do a lot more writing than I do now, and I used to have these books that were just like writing prompts and idea generators, and it was like some of them were pictures and some of them were phrases or things like questions. My personal style is like I like things to at least jog my memory, even if I don't necessarily, or jog my thought process, even if I don't necessarily answer all of them. So there's this world building document from the Writing Cafe, but also one of a writer who I like, whose name I'm not sure if I'm going to get right, Patricia C. Reed. I think it's Reed, not Reedy, Wrede, has fantasy world building questions, part of her website. So pcread.com/fantasy-worldbuilding-questions. And they're grouped into sections of like the basic world, the world. Is it an alternate Earth? Is it not Earth at all? And then it has some questions on physical and historical features, and then questions on magic. And some of these things will be answered. Like if you're writing a D&D campaign, obviously you don't need to invent things that are already invented by by the mechanics.
Yeah.
But like social organization, like government, politics, crime in the legal system, like some things that I think thoughts that we can start to sort of build on to give your world that depth and flavor of being like more of a fleshed out place and not just like a string of one-off steps on the way to get from, even if you are traversing along those steps from A to Z, having the idea that other things are there and in the world gives it that wholly fleshed out feeling. So we've already discussed this one. What is your world called? We've already discussed that. But are there different regions? How are you thinking of this? Like, do they have names of the regions? You don't need to come up with these now, but I'm just going to read some of these to you, and if they spark your ideas, like how large is your population? Do people have high life expectancies, lower life expectancies? Is there a lot of diversity? What's the climate like? Is it really rainy? Is it really hot? Do the different regions have different weathers? Like even simple things like that, at least for me when I'm reading a story, and it'll have that feeling of like, okay, this is like a place and not just actions that are happening. I think that can help it if you're setting the scene.
I mean, I guess I could pick like a spot that I assume they're going to start in. It might be helpful if I knew what races they wanted to be, so I could like start them in one of their hometowns or whatever. But
and is your thought that they will all be of the same race, or are you letting them pick whatever they want?
I would let them pick, and that comes into things. Okay, so one of the thoughts I had was that people generally live with their own people. So there's people who feel comfortable more with their own, and people who feel more comfortable in a mix. And there would be a sort of uneven amount of that. So I think generally we're talking maybe 70% of people in this world live with their own kind.
Okay.
And 30% maybe live in a mix scenario. And what differentiates sort of the culture of each race, besides what you get in D&D 5e, is every single race across this world has one thing in common, which is every race believes that there's a journey they must go on if they need to solve a problem that's bigger than what they can do themselves. And this takes different forms in different communities.
Or is this more like a religious pilgrimage type
this
situation?
is much more their religion.
And are there different religions? Because there's a whole religion section. Are there different religions? Does everyone have the same religion in common?
They all have the same religion in the extent that every single race on this world believes that they can solve their life problem in a journey. And then each race thinks that the journey is a little different, community to community. So let's just say that for the elves, who are going to be your like wood elves, generally that kind of concept, your Tolkienian elves, your Rivendell elves, that kind of thing.
Elves.
Let's say as a society, they have an understanding that when a problem comes around, you don't whip it. You have to make a journey to a master. You have to interact with a person. And once you find that master, then they will help you solve their problem. As opposed to, let's say, Dragonborn, where their journey is to the gods. You must find a god, and they will solve your problem.
Okay.
Dwarves, let's say their journey is to the self, so they must look within to solve their problem. It's in there. It's been there the whole time. They just have to seek it out. And there's other ones like journey to materials. So you must go around collecting all the materials you need. You might not know what those materials are when you start the journey, but by the end of the journey, you know you've gathered all the materials you need because at some point you figured out what your problem was and how to solve it. And then there's journey to nature, and those are the 5 that I've fleshed out. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think that generally makes sense to me.
So if we say that maybe they're starting, okay, so I did also have a concept of like a high sort of evil wizard society that kind of is like Thay, sitting right next to a beach dwarf of the Adventure Zone variety. Who are very cool and chill and surfery, and they have a conflict. So that's where I was going to kind of start this adventure. Like the players are tasked with kind of figuring out why these two communities are in conflict, what's going on, and try to come up with a diplomatic solution to help them. So we're talking about maybe a society of humans. And we could say that they believe in a journey to materials, and a society of elves that believe in dwarves that believe in a journey to the self.
Most of the questions that I've found are more like world building than story building. So like here's some general other ones that might help spark some thoughts about these communities. What types of government do they have? Does each group have their own kind of government, or is there a general governmental structure? How do they choose their next leaders? What's their relationships? Like, do they interact with the outside other groups? Like, are there ambassadors? How do they deal with differing political opinions and laws from group to group? Like, could those sort of things cause these tensions that you're talking about on top? And maybe those laws and beliefs are driven by the way each group thinks about how to solve their problems.
Yeah, for sure.
And that could create like I feel like if you put it into a context that's very relatable to the everyday, so people's real life lived experience. And that's why I think like bringing it back to like conflict between two regions is relatable.
So, I mean, if we say that like the elves they solve their problems with Journey to the Master, maybe they are sort of a monolithic society where there is a head, a master of the community that, for your mundane problems, you can go to them. Like they've been elected to take on that role in most cases of problem solver. They say, hey, I'm the master. And perhaps that's like a lifelong
position.
It's kind of like a Supreme Court position. And you can kind of see like what mundane problems would be. It would be like solving disputes between people and acts of God that happen? How do I, fix my livelihood if it's broken? That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
There might be journeys that this master can't necessarily help people with. Mm-hmm. If someone, let's say I could see something like someone in this community loses their life partner, then they have this very, very hard task of getting over this loss. And so the master of the community of elves might not be able to help. I mean, they can provide a shoulder to cry on or an ear to listen, but they won't necessarily have the answer for this individual. And so this individual might then have to seek a master outside of the community.
Right. That makes sense.
And I could see like journey to materials, like that might be like a voting system based on something. Like it could be like, I have 3 coins. One is platinum, one is gold, one is copper. And there are 12 of us. And when we vote, we do it in a weighted structure. So if I feel really strongly about this, I am going to put my platinum coin in. That kind of thing. Because then it's very based on materials, and you're thinking about like the value of materials and that kind of thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that kind of brings me to like my next question to ask you, like, what is the economy like? Is it different in all of the different groups? Like, how is it reflected in their cultures or in the people? Like, are there gaps between classes in these different areas? Is there like scarcity of resources?
I take a very like Tolkien approach to economics where I kind of like ignore it.
Okay.
Or it's sort of like a D&D system where it's like we have a universal exchange currency, and so whatever you want you can get for this.
Even like bartering, like
yeah, I could see that
often used. Maybe
in sort of less connected areas you might not have a gold exchange system. I could see like and that might be useful in storytelling to signal, oh, these people don't have a lot of contact with
the outside world.
These people over here, right? It's usually just with themselves or with traders, things like that. Yeah.
Right. Like, can you substitute? I mean, one of the questions specifically on here is what currency is used? Can trade be substituted for money? What is money made of? Is counterfeit easy? How is money decorated? There's some very detailed questions on here.
I understand why this is important, because people in the past have often used money and money decoration to signal power, but I don't necessarily want to get into all these details because I don't want to highlight this by belaboring the point, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's just like, I mean, there will be times in your world where your people need supplies.
Yes.
And so it's good to at least have some general idea. Like, are they going to go to a town and be like, in exchange for these supplies that we need, we will fight these monsters for you. Yeah. Or we will pay you 10 gold coins. Like, I think it's...
In some places it's going to be one thing. In some places it's going to be another.
Exactly. And I think just like having... Well, and I think that can help you distinguish your regions.
Yeah,
I don't think you need to go through all of these, like, too many depth of these questions, but just a general sense of like... In region A with this type of people B, they tend to have this type of economy C, either gold or bartering, and it's just like something like that. Yeah, because that can at least give a sense of like, oh yeah, these are different people than the people that we met the other day. Like, they look different, they have different ideals, they eat different food, they dress differently, and also they don't have gold, or they do have gold.
Yes, indeed.
Like just when you were talking about like the people who their journey is to resources, like that is what kind of like made me start thinking about money and materials like that. And whereas like the people who are like journey to self or journey to a master, it's like, oh, okay, we have this problem.
Maybe their currency is your time.
Right?
So like maybe like 5 minutes of your time is worth like a sheep.
Or a room for the night is worth like you helping fix their roof, like whatever it happens to be. And that kind of tells you about the different type of people, I would say, like that.
What a good thought.
Like, I feel like that, like, if you have a society where it's like, oh yeah, you can totally stay with us for the night, just help me with this. Like, that's a much more warm and welcoming feel to me. At least that's my general impression. As opposed to, like, you can have a room for the night here, but it will cost you 20 gold pieces.
Yep.
It's just a different feel, and it can set a different tone.
Yes.
Here's a good one.
This is exactly environmental storytelling, by the way. You hit the nail on the head right there.
And it is a lot of what I like to think about in writing. It's sort of like where I would often, when I was doing a lot of writing, get like very off track. I had a tendency to like not really have a plot, but just like write about places and people and things that they were doing and wander from one thing to the other.
Hey, Haley, have you ever considered DMing? Long form?
Long form DMing. In a world in which I had many times, I would totally do it.
I hear you.
But this is very fun for me because I like to think about these things, but don't necessarily have a time frame to do this for myself. Here's a section with questions on customs, which sounds like it could be interesting for you. How does the population greet each other? Are there any like rituals or ceremonies surrounding birth, death? Is there marriage?
Well, I was going to say a lot of these things are spelled out in like
I guess that's true in some of
the documents for D&D, but not a lot of them are actually.
Yeah, it's interesting because D&D presents this being very like fleshed out and the world's already there for you to play in, but in some ways, to me, unless you're playing like a published adventure in which they say like you go to this place and this person has this type of attitude, like I feel like in those scenarios a lot of this work is done for you, but I feel like there's a tendency for it to feel like it's kind of force created for you.
Yeah.
But then it's not entirely there, which is why, like, you brought up Jay's world and the work that Jay's done on that world. Like, I think that is some of this thought about, like, the different regions and how they're different from each other and how they're distinct. Like, that's what gives it some of the depth. So let's see. There's a whole section with questions on fashion. What is the most common material used for clothing? What colors are popular? This is a fun document. This document, just for everyone's reference, is 30 pages long.
Yeah. I do want to...
So
this chat has been amazing and fabulous. I do want to address...
Yes.
Pixar's 22 Rules of Storytelling number 4.
Yes.
Is a little bit of a framework. A prompt.
Yes.
To think about a story. So number 4 is once upon a time... There was blank. Every day, blank, something happened. One day, blank, something new happened. Because of that, blank, some result. And because of that, blank, because of that result, something else happened. Until finally, blank.
This is totally the Pixar format. Just think through for a moment your favorite Pixar film.
Yes.
And Marvel. Do you have any thoughts about this? Filling in this prompt. It actually ties into the one question I was going to ask.
Yes.
Which was, there was a section on history. And, like, are there major historical points? And you were talking about the triads and the different, like, layers of triads. I feel like you could think about kind of the past in this way. Like, once upon a time, there was the first triad.
Yes.
And every day they did this.
Right.
But then one day, this happened to them.
And I think, like, the everyday one is really important because what you're doing is you're setting the stage, like, you're setting the scene, basically. You're saying, this is life as it exists. And then one day, something different and new happened, and then there's this result and that result and this resolution kind of thing.
Just think about Up. Just think about up for a moment.
Yes, indeed. And then one day they went up in the air and there were balloons on a house. And that was different. So I could see a statement, something like, once upon a time, there was a priestess who was responsible for collecting a sacrifice of the prettiest wildflowers from a field. And this was a sacrifice for the fourth creator, whom she was a caretaker of their tomb. But one day, she collected her wildflowers, she brought them to the tomb, but she was unable to pass through the threshold. There was something blocking her. Because of that, she got very scared that something bad was going to happen because she could not give her sacrifice to this person. So because of that, she ran to the village, and finally 3 big people, one lady, one man, and one non-binary person came with her to the tomb and toppled the front lintel and posts down so that she could get in. And that is why this tomb is the way it is, in disrepair, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's some thoughts I have.
I liked that description because you could kind of picture the whole situation, right?
Yes, yeah.
And it had a clear beginning, middle, end, and impact.
Yeah.
One of the other rules of storytelling that kind of spoke to me was actually the first one. I mean, all of these are great, and we will link them for you. But number 1, you admire a character for trying more than for their successes, and that actually mirrors one of the other resources that I had been, when I was browsing for this, I'd found one that was talking about, you're making a mistake in your world building, here's how to fix it, is the name of this article from Standout Books Publishing Services. And it's about basically how you need to add flaws. And you can't make, the essential, so here we go. The essential technique is checking that your world has flaws. I'm not talking about dragons in the hinterlands or that asteroid hurtling towards us from a distant exoplanet. Those are plot elements, and while they may look like downsides, they're part of a perfect system constructed by the author. No, I'm talking about the small stuff. You could make it work, but don't. So it's just talking about how...
So flaws make your characters and your situations real.
Yes. The magic of that there's just the flaws make it more relatable and more everything doesn't have to be consistent and perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And they basically if there's minor flaws in an overall system that makes a lot of sense, which it actually sort of sounds like you have already started thinking about, even if you weren't doing so intentionally, where you have a large amount of the population lives with other people that are just like themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But then you have a smaller amount of the population that doesn't do that, by describing these minor almost flaws to the system, creates a different feel or something to be focusing in on. One of the examples they actually use in this article is about Harry Potter, which is a thing that I love. And it talks about, because my childhood,
same
I grew up with Harry Potter. It's the first Harry Potter book came out, I think, when I was in first grade. Maybe, or second grade, pretty early on, and then I read them 1 book a year all the way through high school, or however often they came out. But anyway, it's talking about how, take for example, the Hogwarts Sorting Hat. This entity judges a student's character and places them in one of 4 houses dedicated to key attributes. These attributes, however, are more about potential than destiny. And so graduates of the brave houses can grow up to be selfish villains, while the graduates of the sneaky house can go on to protect the school and others. They're in the minority, but they're still in the mix, suggesting a generally blurred boundary between potential and actuality. And it could have been a much more definite system in which there were good and evil, but focusing on potential, there was room for the system to fail to define exactly who someone would become, which makes it a lot more realistic. And there's, not every child of wizards is a wizard. There's
Yep.
And not every muggle is always a muggle. Like,
yeah, there's some unpredictability in there.
Yes.
It's not all same.
Yes. So this is a pretty long article, but it just gives a little bit of perspective. Like, you might not think about it when you're reading.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great thing to keep in mind, for sure.
Yes. Number 9 on the Pixar list.
Pixar rule number 9.
Rule number 9. Perfect. When you're stuck, make a list of what wouldn't happen next. And lots of times the material to get you unstuck will show up.
I love that, because why not? Like, why not just pick one of the things that definitely wouldn't happen and have it be the thing that happens?
Yeah.
Or
I love
it
that
could
idea.
be
Like a combination.
Then you're swerving on the players, because they're probably not expecting that either.
Right. And like, also it might be a combination of 3 things that definitely couldn't happen might be the one thing that could happen, or the opposite of one of those things, maybe.
Yes.
So,
or something related.
Yes. So there you go.
That's a great rule, for sure.
Check out these Pixar's 22 Rules of Storytelling. It's a picture storyboard type thing, and it has pictures from everyone's favorite Pixar movies.
Oh.
And it's cute.
Yay.
And you should look at it. And hopefully this helps you in building your next world.
Indeed.
And share it with us.
Yes. At Insight Check Pod on Twitter.
Ooh.
As always, we'd like to thank Amy T. Falcone for our social media branding and faces. We would like to thank Vince Vept for our intro and outro music, Never Stand Alone. We would like to thank you for giving us a 5, 4, 3, 2, or 1 rating on iTunes. Yes, we'll still thank you, but we appreciate your time and the effort you put into giving us any sort of rating at all. Thank you for being here as well. And we hope that you will stick around in 2 more episodes. We're going to have our 100th episode extravaganza. We will all be participating.
Yes.
One way or the other.
Every single one of us.
Yes,
Get
indeed.
excited.
Ooh-hoo. And as always, we are answering your cues from our collective A's. This
was
Insight
Check.
Hey. Have a good day, night, life.
Whatever time
Bye.
it is. Bye.